Good evening, everyone. I'm Anita, and I welcome everyone on behalf of Manhattan Meditation Center who is joining us on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook. We really appreciate you making the time to be with us. More importantly, choosing to be with us when you have so many other choices available where you can use your time. That is really inspiring, actually, for us. Before we dive into today's topic, a few announcements. Once again, all these talks are available on Manhattan Meditation Center's Facebook page and YouTube channel. These are public broadcasts, so recordings are available for a very, very long time. Um, if you have not subscribed to our channel, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So not only you get to watch these talks, but you get notifications for our other um, services, what we offer. Besides this talk, Manhattan Meditation Center offers meditation twice a day, power boost meditation in the afternoon at 12 p.m., and good night meditation at 8 p.m. every night. I think except Sundays, the time is a little different. Meditations are only for 15 to 20 minutes. If you are interested in enhancing your meditation skills or learning how to meditate, we encourage you to try it out. If you do not have the time to join live when meditations are happening, recordings are also available on the YouTube channel, and we encourage you to take the benefit at your convenience. Besides this, we do offer retreats and workshops. Currently, a retreat reviving the higher self is going on, which started on September 20th. So we are already midway through. But if you are interested or you have attended the retreat earlier and you want to revise some of the lessons, registrations are still open. We encourage you to register. The information is on our website. I will post the link for the website. You will be able to copy it from chat. We alternate between retreats and workshops. So the next month in October, on October 23rd, we are conducting a workshop. The title is Science of Happiness. If you are interested, again, links are on the website. Registration is open. Do register, spread the word to your friends and family whom you think who might be interested or take the benefit. That's all for housekeeping. I started thinking these Thursdays as, thank God it's Thursday, because I get my dose of looking at things with a new set of eyes, with a new perspective, having little small cues to solve the issues on Thursdays. I don't know how your journey is, but I really enjoy it, listening to our speakers, new views, and being with all of you. So today's topic is word and actions, the mirror of our thoughts, right? Today's speaker is Judy Rogers. She's a lot of you must be familiar with Sister Judy, but for the benefit of the ones who are joining us first time, Sister Judy Rogers is a writer and a communication consultant. She has held a lot of prominent positions in a lot of companies, but more importantly, she is a spiritual student and is a Raj Yogi for a very, very long time. If I'm not misquoting, I think almost like 40 years. And the combination of the worldly affairs, the knowledge, and the spiritual knowledge together really gives us, all of us, new insights. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Sister Judy.
Thank you, Anita. I'm struck by how well you sustain your students all these offers will sustain you at lunch, will sustain you at the evening, will sustain you through retreats, will teach you meditation. This is the kind of support that we all need right now. So very nice.
Yes, absolutely. We
Yeah.
try to do our best, and they really cooperate. I mean, it's through thick and thin, they are with us. We have a lot of loyal and regulars.
Why not be loyal when you've got that kind of love and support, huh? So, well, it's lovely to be with you. And I'm having a rainy night where I am. I'm in the Catskills in the retreat center that the Brahma Kumaris have here. And we've got a stormy night. I don't know what's going on for you, but it's a good time for us to come together. So you should feel free to ask questions throughout. I'm going to chat with you a little bit. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different twist on this topic. So I want to start with the thought that the world that we have is the world that we have made together. So the world we have is the outer reflection of the minds and hearts of the 7.9 billion souls that live in this world. And also, so someone's telling me in the chat, Northern New Jersey, stormy also. Okay, so we're all cozy in here together. So not only is the world that we have the one we have made together, but the life that you have is the life that you have created with your thoughts, words, and actions. So what I'm saying is that what we are inside is the source of what we say and what we do. So you might really like the life you have, in which case you say, great, I'm on track, I'm thinking and doing and speaking about things in just the right way. Or you might say, I want my life to be more beautiful, more great, maybe beyond great. So what do we do if we want to make our lives more beautiful and greater than they currently are? Or if we want to make our world more beautiful and greater than it currently is? So I thought tonight I would take you on a little journey with me. And I'm going to start in 2006. Which was the 90th birthday of someone named Dadi Janki. Now, I don't know how many of you know who I'm talking about with Dadi Janki. If you know, can you go to reactions on your Zoom screen and just put your hand up if you know who I'm talking about? Okay, got it. Okay, so some of you do. Some of you don't. So let me just say a little bit about her. So Dadi Janki, she was my teacher. And she led the Brahma Kumaris for many years. She opened up the Brahma Kumaris service in outside of India. She was tiny. I don't think she was 5 feet tall. I think she was like 4'10" or something. But she was mighty. I mean, this was a soul that, especially, I work a lot with men and women who are leader types, and they loved her. She spoke to them, whether it was the House of Lords or CEOs or whomever. She spoke with them so straight, so honest, that she had many friends in those networks. She was really a remarkable soul. And so when it came time for her to turn 90, my friend Gayatri and I approached her and told her we'd like to write a book for your 90th birthday, in honor of all these years of your life. And she thought for a minute and she said, no, thanks. I don't need a book. And we said, well, okay, how about if we write a book about people who serve the world, something you really care about? And she said, all right, yeah, you can do that. So we set out on this quest, and I'm not going to tell you the whole big long story because we don't have enough time tonight, but I'll tell you the essence, which is that we were looking for men and women in the world who had this quality we were calling beyond greatness, that when people experienced them, they just knew there was something remarkable about this person. And our plan was we were going to collect these beyond great people whose words and actions were wonderful. And then we were going to look inside and say, okay, when these people were doing these great things, when they were being so wonderful, what was going on in their heads and their hearts? So that was our plan. So we everyone initially gave the same names: Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Mother Teresa, and Nelson Mandela, right? Those same four people came up over and over again. And we said, well, that's great. Those definitely, those are great people, but we'd like to talk with them. We want to interview people. We want to see if we can talk with people who actually do those things. So we began to get a few names, and we flew off and met with those people to try to both understand what people experienced as great, and then to try to understand what went on inside them. So I'm going to just read you a couple of little short stories so you can get the drift of what I'm talking about. So I don't know if any of you all remember, I think it was in, what year was it? 2007. Any of you remember the Subway Hero? Put your little reaction hand up if you remember the Subway Hero. No, you don't. Okay, a couple of you do. All right. So let me remind the rest of you of who this was. So this was a man, 50-year-old man, named Wesley Autry. And his story showed up in the New York Times on January 3rd, 2007. And I'm just going to read you the essence. Mr. Autry was waiting for the downtown local at 137th Street and Broadway in Manhattan around 12:45 p.m. He was taking his two daughters, aged 4 and 6, home before he went to work. Nearby, a man collapsed, his body convulsing. Mr. Autry and two women rushed to help, he said. The man, Cameron Halapiter, aged 20, managed to get up, but then he stumbled to the platform edge and fell to the tracks between the two rails. The headlights of the number 1 train appeared. I had to make a split decision, Mr. Autry said. So he made one and he leapt. Mr. Autry lay on Mr. Halapiter, his heart pounding, pressing him down in a space roughly a foot deep. The train's brakes screeched, but it couldn't stop in time. 5 cars rolled overhead before the train stopped. The cars passing inches from his head, smudging his blue knit cap with grease. Mr. Autry heard onlookers' screams. "We're okay down here," he yelled, "but I've got 2 daughters up there." Let them know that their father is okay. He heard cries of wonder and applause. The power was cut, and the workers got them out. Mr. Holopater, a student at the New York Film Academy, was taken to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center. He had only bumps and bruises, said his grandfather, Jeff Friedman. The police said it appeared that he had suffered a seizure. Mr. Autry refused medical help because he said nothing was wrong. He did visit Mr. Holopater in the hospital before heading to his night shift. "I don't feel like I did something spectacular. I just saw someone who needed help," Mr. Autry said. "I did what I felt was right." So he acted in a split second. He saw that this Cameron Holopater was in jeopardy, and he leaped onto the tracks in front of the oncoming train. Whatever he saw in that moment when Cameron fell onto the tracks evoked an instant response in him. Now, let me just say a word about this book. The name of the book that I'm talking about is Something Beyond Greatness: Conversations with a Man of Science and a Woman of God. So what we did was, as we found these stories, we would ask the Woman of God, that is Dottie Janke, to explain her take on what was going on. And then we would ask the Man of Science, who was Humberto Maturana of Chile, to explain from the scientific perspective what was going on. So when we told them this story, both of them said that what happened in that instant when Wesley Autry saw Cameron Holopater was what they would call love. He acted from that loving vision, and in an instant, he joined the ranks of those heroes who stand as persistent evidence of the goodness in everyday people. So that is definitely someone beyond great, right? This is someone whose actions and whose words would tell you that whatever's going on inside of them is remarkable. But is it always kind of an instantaneous thing? Is it always some hero jumps onto a railroad track and saves the day? It doesn't have to be in that kind of a dramatic moment. So I'm going to tell you one more story, and that was we actually went many places, but I'm just going to tell you 2. So another story, we went to Scotland, and we interviewed a man who was the president of a college. And you know, when we walked in his office, his wall was covered with all these certificates and these awards. He was a big deal, right? A big educator, very active on the global stage of education. So we sat down with him and we said, his name was Bart McGetrick. And so we said to him, "Oh, Mr. McGetrick, when you think about your whole life, you think about all the things you've done, all these big awards, your job as president, whatever, what would you say was a high point for you in your life?" So he thought for a couple of minutes and he said, "I think the high point was to help 2 or 3 students who were struggling personally and domestically, which was clearly affecting their academic performance, and to give them a harbor for rest and to see them flourish after that." He says, in particular, I remember one girl who was having difficulties at home. She was expecting a baby. She wasn't married. At the time, there was tremendous pressure from her family for her to marry and to have that baby in the context of a marriage. She thought she had to leave college, the college where I was a principal. And I said to her, A, don't marry. B, don't leave the college. And C, we'll do what we can do to take care of that baby. Now, what he was really saying was don't marry under pressure, right? Not don't marry in general, but don't marry because you feel pressured. So with the support of McGetrick, who was the college principal at the time, she got the help she needed. And a year and a half later, she did marry. And she actually married the father of this little boy. And she came back and she finished her degree. She went on to be a teacher. And about 10 years later, Bart McGetrick said that he ran into her on the streets. And she was with this boy who was about 12. He was, roughly 10, 12 years old. And he was about to enter secondary school. And he said, seeing the results of what he'd done, he said, so often you don't get to ever see the results of what you do. But in this case, he was able to see what had happened. She was a teacher. She was an excellent teacher. She had not made a decision under pressure. And here was this kid, this happy kid. So he said, it just seemed to me to be able to hold out one's hand to someone like that in a difficult circumstance where the system might have done something different. What I found as principal is that this kind of thing gives you the greatest satisfaction. Something the system wouldn't do, but I could intervene and do. And so we asked him, would you say this was a kind of love? And he said, yes. He said, I would say this was a kind of love. So he called it professional love. I think Dari and Humberto Maturana might have called it more of a spiritual love or humanitarian love. So we continued interviewing people, and they weren't all people who'd been written up in the paper. They weren't all headline news, but we began to sense a commonality in these stories. And what we found was three things. First, they had a vision of love. For example, when Wesley Autry looked at that young man on the subway platform, he didn't think, what is this kid, drunk? What's going on here? He didn't see him as other. He just saw him with love. So, and the same with Bart McGetrick and this young student. So first, a vision of love. Second, they acted from the heart. So they didn't do a lot of thinking. They didn't do any analysis. Imagine if Wesley Autry had said, well, the train's coming, there's how much room is there between the bottom of the train and the ground? It would have been too late, right? Or if Bart McGetrick had started talking about all the rules that had to happen, that had to be solved. So it wasn't about thinking. It was about acting from the heart. And then there was a little bit of magic, a little bit of right place, right time. So this is what we kept seeing, this pattern: vision of love, acting from the heart, and then something about right place, right time. Now, There was something else that happened in these stories that we found, these examples, which was that anytime you ask people about what they'd done, they didn't really make much of it. They kind of said, I was just lucky to be there. That's what Wesley Autry said. Gosh, I was just the lucky guy who happened to be there. Some people in some of the stories just said, I don't know, anybody would have done that. They each one. There was one 16-year-old girl who had rushed down to help a woman who'd been hit in the crosswalk. We asked her, what made you do that? She said, what did you feel about what happened? And she said, oh gosh, I thought the Red Cross training I took was so great. So, they were always crediting someone outside themselves. They had this kind of humility, almost as if they hadn't done these things. And it happened over and over again. Martin Luther King, when we were studying him, he said, that civil rights movement was ready to happen. It would have happened anyway, even if MLK wasn't there. So we were just so baffled, why did all these people keep saying it wasn't them? I didn't do anything. Anybody would have done that. So we were really baffled. And we went to talk with Dottie Janke about that. And we said, what's going on with this? Why do these people have this feeling afterwards, almost like they didn't do it? Like they knew they did it, but it was almost like they didn't somehow think they were the prime actor or something. So we're saying to her, explain this. What's going on with this? And here's what she said. She said, God acts through others to accomplish things in the world. And those who carry out the actions are called instruments. In the moment of action, the hero actor does not have the conscious thought of being an instrument, but feels inspired and then compelled to act in a certain way. Only later, when asked about their heroic actions, do these heroes become aware of a certain detachment from the sense of the I who took the actions. With the feeling of being an instrument, you automatically have this stage of humility. Why? Because your experience is that the act is being accomplished by something bigger than yourself. She called it instrument consciousness. She said, they see with love and receive clear, subtle guidance about what they must do. They feel compelled and they act. She said, this is why we must continuously live with an openness to these touchings and signals from a higher source. Now, if we were in a room together, I would ask you if you've ever had this feeling that somehow you were getting an inner signal about what you should do. Because what Dottie was saying is that this is how God acts in the world. That God accomplishes things by working through people who are instrumental. So in other words, if it wasn't Cameron Holopater's time to die, then some instrument had to be there to make sure that he didn't leave the body then. It wasn't the right time. Now, if we were together in a room, we could have a nice chat about this. So Laura's saying, I always trust my intuition. I think this is a lot what we're talking about, right? We're talking about intuition, instinct, the touching. We call them touchings. And you know, I think this is one reason why we have to be very careful not to tell other people what to do. Because we don't always know what people should do, right? Everyone has their own kind of inner knowing, inner truth, inner instincts about what they should do. And so this magic that we were seeing with this, and this is why, you know, we're talking tonight about the words and actions are the mirror of your thoughts. And I would say not only your thoughts, but your feelings, your instincts, your intuitions, your urgings, your touchings. And this is another reason why with your meditation practice, you keep yourself clear. Because when you're clear, when your mind is quiet, then you get these inner senses of what you need to do, when you should move, when you should not move. And, you know, this interesting phenomenon that people don't even think that they did it necessarily. They see that they were the actor, but they don't necessarily think that they were the ones who set it in motion. So if we want to change our lives, I think one thing that really matters is our awareness of this space of love inside. You know, I know some people are actually uncomfortable with talking about love because they think we're talking about romantic love or something like that. But, you know, this vision of love, when we act from a vision of love, we see in a different way. Humberto Maturana, the scientist, when we did this, said, he described love this way. He said, love is the condition when the other arises in front of you as a legitimate other. In other words, they're worthy of your respect. So when we talk about looking at someone with a vision of love, we're talking about looking at someone and having that feeling that this one is lovely, this one is my brother, this one is my son, this one is this could be my mother. And so we look with that pure vision, and that sets something in motion inside of us. And you know, so often we've been told we have to plan, and we have to make a lot of plans for our future. We have to create steps and where we're going. We have to kind of analyze what's possible. We're actually, I think, instructed to live life in a different way, to live life in terms of kind of thinking and planning. But actually, that's not what we found when we went out to look at this quality that made people become what we would call great. And you know, they didn't feel great. It was the people around them that said, this one is great. You know, this one is really big-hearted. This one is really generous. This one is really a mentor for me. This one is really, this one is a lifesaver for me. It's other people who attribute those qualities to us. It's not that we set out to be great. We set out to be good, right? We set out to be loving. And then what happens from that is what other people call great. So what happens when we live our lives like this? What happens when we live our lives selflessly? So a few things happen. One is that we get the return of that loving action. Right, the return of karma comes to us because our intention is pure. So if we act with a pure intention, we just act out of love. We don't want anything in return. We're not trying to be famous, or we're not acting from like a plan necessarily. It's spontaneous, it's loving, it's from the heart. We get the return of that in terms of the quality of our life. So let me see here. We've got, okay, did someone have a question? Okay. So yeah, so you get the loving return of that, and you also get blessings. You know, there is a ripple effect when we do something like this. The goodness in the action and the purity of the intention is so, it strikes people as so unusual, so beyond the norm, that it travels, the word travels throughout the whole town, right? Throughout the whole community, throughout the family. This is what this one did. So there's a ripple effect as people witness that. And so, you know, when we talk about changing the world, one of the dilemmas is we live in a time where the ripple effect that we're experiencing is of fear, right? We're experiencing a ripple effect of anxiety or fear or worry or sort of a constriction. And that has a chilling effect on society. But the same thing happens with benevolent action. So the same thing happens when someone does something beautiful and good and generous, then that ripple effect happens there too. And it actually changes what goes on for people. It changes what happens in their hearts. It changes what happens in society. So it's quite transformative. You know, it's kind of a lifeboat for our times, this business of acting from love. And it's innate in all of us. So it's a natural quality. It's not that we have to go acquire it. It's not that Bart McGetrick or Wesley Autry or any of these people studied how to be loving, how to act from a loving place. It was just innate in them. So if you don't have any thoughts on this, I want to share something else with you, but let me just check in first. And what about this natural love in the heart in your own life? I'm guessing you probably, it's most familiar perhaps as a parent or grandparent, or you do things that are really selfless. For someone you love, you really want things to be better for them, and you act out of a really pure place. So, okay. So when we had mostly finished writing this book, and we went to see Dadi Janki in India, and we were asking her about these famous people. We were saying, well, you know, Mahatma Gandhi, he was really great. And she said, yes. She said, Gandhi was great. She said he liberated India. That was certainly great. She said he had this quality of nonviolence, which was amazing. She said, but remember, liberating India wasn't what he set out to do. He set out to create Ram Raj, to create heaven on earth. And she said he wasn't able to do that. And she said the people around him, he was trying to get people around him to embrace nonviolence. They couldn't do it. They praised him but they couldn't do it themselves. They would rather praise him. And she said it was the same with Nelson Mandela. She said he ended apartheid. He freed South Africa. He had this amazing quality of tolerance and forgiveness, but he wasn't able to make others like himself. And she said, at this time, we don't need individual heroes. We don't need individual great ones. She said, that's not what the world needs. She said, what the world needs now is communities of greatness. And she said, and that's what God is making now. Communities of greatness. So that brings us to how do we change not only our life, but the lives of those around us? And how do we change communities we're in? Yeah. Did someone say something? So this business of the creating communities of greatness, what God is doing at this time is what Dadi said, is what we're all engaged in at this point. You know, the world needs our pure thoughts at this time. And the world needs our pure hearts at this time. And it's hard, right? It's hard to have pure and loving thoughts at a time when the world is struggling, when there's so much going on that can make us shrink, make us afraid, and make us anxious. But when we're afraid and anxious and fearful, then that inner state won't allow us to have the words and the actions that will change our lives and change the lives of others. So if we're going to change our lives and change the lives of others, we have to start by changing our inner state. By being a part of this community of greatness that Dadi Janki was talking about. And we do that, we start that process with our meditation practice. So what goes on with our meditation practice that helps us be a part of this community of greatness? So first, we come to understand who we really are. We are fundamentally loving. We have that same love that's demonstrated in all those stories, whether it's Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi or Wesley Autry or a school teacher or someone on your block or your coach or someone in your past. That love is innate in the soul. And that love is still intact no matter what happens to you. That love is still what's driving everything you do, unless it's covered up by fear and anxiety and worry. So when you move into your meditation practice, you move to that place in your heart, a place of love, a place in your mind, a place of the thoughts of the human family, your brothers, this place of brotherhood and sweetness. And you make that your home. You make that your ground. You make that your fundamental identity. And you work from that place. You build that inner capacity for love, for peace, for kindness, for compassion, for sweetness. And when you do that, when you return to that every day, when you make that kind of reinforce that inside, then naturally, when you find yourself confronted with something, you act from that place. You act from that place of natural love and sweetness and peace, because that's who you really are. And so that's the acting from the heart. You're acting from who you really are. You don't think, you don't plan so much. You just move through the world responding in the moment you're in. You don't get too far out ahead of yourself. We can't actually get too far out ahead of ourselves right now. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in the next minute, let alone the next year. So it's about coming into yourself, coming into the present, coming into who you truly are, and living in that place of love. Yeah, I think that's right. Laura's saying, I think we've learned to expect the unexpected over this past year. You know, I think this is part of it's a hallmark of our time, right? That things are happening really fast. You know, it's not like it used to be. I mean, those who grew up, came of age even 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it was a little bit more predictable time than now. So how do we live in a time like this? How do we live in a fragile time where we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment? You know, people are having heart attacks in their 40s. You know, hurricanes are coming in places they never came. I mean, the list is very long, and it can keep us in a state of permanent surprise. And what happens to us is we become kind of absorbed outside and kind of lose our way. And so Liz is saying it's hard when your heart has been damaged. How do you come out of that? Yeah, it is hard. It's hard. Our hearts are very fragile. And when you look inside, you know, one of the things about meditation is that you turn inside, right? I mean, normally we're absorbed outside with the headlines and our schedules and our families and our work and all of that. We're very absorbed outside, and we're always reverberating. We're always in this kind of echoing what's happening outside. But with your meditation practice, you turn inside. And when you turn inside, then now you're in the world of memories and thoughts and feelings and those urges and touchings that we talked about. And so, yeah, one of the things Liz is bringing up is forgiveness. I would say forgiveness of others and forgiveness of ourselves. So how do we do that? We actually had a story in this book about forgiveness from a young woman a Nigerian woman whose father and mother were killed. And she said, I just, you know, I'm having trouble. I can't really forgive this person who did this to my father. And, you know, the scientist said, you know, of course, that would be really, really hard. But when we can move to a place of forgiveness, we not only free ourselves, but we free the other person. I think forgiveness is a really big subject right now, because I think we have been wronged. Many of us have really been wronged. We feel people have done things to us that we just can't make peace with. You know, we can't forgive. But when we carry those feelings of blame in the heart, we actually don't have access to the things I'm talking about. You can't get that touching to act from the heart if your heart is so filled with sorrow or so filled with blame. You won't pick up that touching. You won't be able to sense it. It's very subtle. Those touchings about what to do are very subtle. So if our blame or our sorrow or our guilt, if it's blame of the self, are too embedded, then there's big loss. We can't pick up the signals of the soul. So it's really important to forgive. And so how do we forgive? How do we forgive? Well, I think part of it has to do with acceptance. A lot of our life right now has to do with acceptance. When something really difficult happens, we have to move to a place where we say, okay, this wasn't what I wanted. I'm having trouble making peace with this, but this is what's happened. And there's almost always, I would say there is always benefit living inside. Yeah, radical acceptance, that's nice, Joseph. There's almost always benefit living inside whatever happens. Have you ever lost a job and it opened a door to your consultancy? Or you were forced to move and you found in the new place something wonderful happened? You got sick, but during the time of your sickness, you went inside and a new you emerged. I mean, there's a lot of benefit that comes out of these things that feel adverse. So to be able to accept whatever's happened, that's the first step in forgiving, just to accept. And then second, you need to be able to look at that other person who you feel has harmed you as a soul. Maybe a soul who's done something really wrong. Maybe they've made a big mistake. But fundamentally, in their original state, they too had goodness and innocence. And so if you can look past the mistake they made, past the harm they did, and all you're saying to them is, you've done this thing that has caused me harm. It must be that at the time you did it, you thought that's what you had to do. And for the sake of my own peace in the heart, and for the sake of your peace, I forgive you completely. Right? I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's very, very valuable. Poonam, yes, start from a place of kindness and empathy. Yep. Kindness and empathy, that's nice. Liza said, I moved into healing by saying I'm not different from them. That's right. I'm not different from them. I've made mistakes. If we don't forgive each other, we become so trapped in our blaming that we're actually constricted. And the states that I'm talking about here, these states of inner love, are free-flowing states. They come from these touchings that Dadi Janki was talking about. How can God use you as an instrument for his work in the world if your heart is locked up? If your mind is filled with blame, or your heart is filled with sorrow, God may want to work through you, but you're not available. You won't be able to pick up the subtle touching that's coming about what you should do. And
Sister Judy,
yeah, go ahead.
may I share my, as you said very rightly, all of us, we have been hurt, and that does put the heart in a cage kind of thing. But in my journey, when I came into the spiritual knowledge, one thing which opened it up is hearing that my karma is in my hand. And whatever others do, that is their choice. And what is important is how I act and all. And that really brought the thing of working innately, right? That in the moment, just be available for help. And that healed. Once you start doing that, that heals your, the heart which has been hurt and broken. And
That's right. That's beautiful, Anita. That's right. I mean, the way karma works, you're not responsible for what anyone else did to you. That's what they did. That's their karmic account. You are responsible for what you do. And so if you can locate the part of you that is just pure love, that's who you were when you arrived in the world. That's who you were before you had your heart broken. If you can locate that inside yourself and that empathy for the other who may feel they've made an enormous mistake or may not realize it yet, but may someday realize it. But whatever you do, that's what you get the return of. So if you can forgive, if you can extend yourself, if you cannot hold hard feelings for someone, then that positive karma accrues to you. Not only does it accrue to you as positive karma, but it actually turns into a kind of inner strength. Anytime you know you have been able to forgive someone who's behaved badly or meanly, someone who's really tried to hurt you, someone who's gossiped about you or tried to get you to lose your job or whatever bad things people do to each other. You know, there's two games going on, right? There's the game of the one we're in that's kind of all around us, our job, our family, etc. But then there's the big spiritual world that we're in. And they're not the same. You know, in the game of the things right around you, if you get ahead of someone else, you get points. If someone else gets ahead of you, you lose points. But in the spiritual game, you get your rewards for virtue, for kindness, love, compassion, generosity of heart, patience, empathy, all of those things. That's what turns you into greatness, right? That's what accrues to you as greatness. It's funny, there was a book written by David Brooks, who writes for the New York Times, and he's on the, what's it called, NewsHour. And he wrote a book about, I forget the name of it now, I'll have to think about it. But he opens it up talking about virtue. And he said there's two kinds of virtues. There's resume virtues and there's eulogy virtues. He said, so the resume virtues are the ones that you put on your resume, right? Gets, you know, a good leader, well organized, really efficient, got ahead in his or her career, all of that kind of thing. Works long hours for the company, very, you know, all of that. That's your resume virtues. Your eulogy virtues are the ones you want people to talk about at your funeral. Now, you wouldn't feel so good if people talked about your resume virtues at your funeral, right? What do you want people to say at your funeral? Gosh, how loving, how courageous, how kind. Really went out of her way to be there when we really needed it. Brought the community together. So loving, so patient, stood by us in our hard times. That's what you want people to say at your funeral. So when we're managing in this fragile world, what we're really wanting to do, the lifeboat for us, is can I stay connected to my true self? Because my true self and my true original eternal self, I'm love. I'm peace. I'm kindness. I'm compassion. I'm patience. That's who each of us is in our true self. And these stories that I shared with you of these people who were labeled by others to be heroes, they were just acting from their true self. They didn't really want anything from anyone. They didn't want praise. They weren't trying to be great. They were just being in their true self. That's it. And each of us has that capacity. That's our ground. That's who we came in as. And the world might have tried to distract us from that. But in your heart, when you sit down and in the quietness of your own practice, you go inside, you know who you are. You know your own goodness. You know your own inner beauty. And when you stay in that place, everything you do from that pure place comes back to you many times. It comes back to you as beneficial karmas. It comes back to you as blessings from the people around you. It comes back to you as wholeness in your own self. You can live in peace. When you stay in your true self, you live in peace.
There is one more interesting thing, Sister Judy. When we do not behave as per our true self, right, it does bother the consciousness. And that's when we call others to justify whatever we did is right. When we behave true to our nature, then we don't feel like talking, like the heroes you quoted.
Yeah.
Because you are
they don't
just,
have anything to say,
yeah,
right?
it's so much in peace with yourself
Yeah,
that you don't feel like you need to say anything about it.
that's right. That's exactly right. You're completely at peace. Your conscience is clear. So I'm putting the name of the book in the chat, Something Beyond Greatness. Conversations with a man of science and a woman of God. But that's really the gift, isn't it? You know, there's a story in the book, and I'll close with this because we're a little bit over, of the man who used to head up, what's his name? Federico Mayor, who created the culture of peace at the United Nations. And they were going to give an award. This was before Nelson Mandela and Frederick de Klerk got the, I would like to read you this actually because it's so moving. Let me see if I can find it quickly because it's exactly the point that Anita is making. So they were about to give this award to Frederick de Klerk and Nelson Mandela, this peace award. And let me see if I can find the passage for you. He was at head of UNESCO. And he said, normally when somebody's been a prisoner, like Nelson Mandela had been on Robben Island for all those years, 27 years, they come out saying with a vengeance, boy, when I get free, you'll see what I'll do. If I leave here, I'll get even. But Mandela was thinking exactly the opposite. He was thinking, the problem is that when I leave here, I must embrace them. I must say that even though I have been 27 years in prison, I love everybody, whatever they are, blacks or whites. In this case, there was someone else who was playing a critical role in the story of South Africa. This is Mayor talking. You see, you need the other person. And he said, in this case, Mandela found Frederick de Klerk. Now, de Klerk was the president of South Africa. And he said, de Klerk was this kind of a person. He said, so I gave them the first Peace Prize of UNESCO. And he said, before I gave the award, I went to meet them both. He said that Nelson Mandela I'd known before. But he said, when I had a meeting alone with Frederick de Klerk, I told him, Mr. President, you know that very probably if you follow this way of friendship with Nelson Mandela, perhaps in 6 months, you will not be president anymore. You will lose all your power. And de Klerk looked at him and said, oh, but Mr. Mayor, at this moment, I will be able to sleep very well. because it's a problem of conscience, right? And this is what you were saying. When we live out of our hearts, when we live exactly in alignment with the true self, we sleep at night. We make friendships based on all the right reasons. And we know that in that moment at our funeral, they're going to say those nice eulogy virtues about us, right? Not talk about our resume virtues. So, okay, a little bit of a chit chat tonight with you all. I just think this business of what is going to get us through these fragile times, it's love. It's love. We have to be there for each other. Love is the lifeboat. And love of God helps the soul to have that home inside. When the soul's connected with its spiritual source, then this well of love and peace and joy is natural. And that's our lifeboat. That's what gets us through. So, do you want to just close with a little bit of, just do a 1-minute meditation, huh? So just sit quietly with yourself and let all the thoughts that are racing around in your head, all the headlines, whatever's coming across your cell phone, let all of that quiet down. For just a minute, don't check your phone and don't think about what you heard today. Just sit quietly. Ask your mind to be really still. And slow your thoughts down and become silent. And turn your face inside and become aware of what a beautiful soul you are. Living in this body, living in this time, but you, the soul, are very beautiful. Your natural nature is to be completely at peace. This is why you love to be in nature, because it reminds you of your own peace. And your heart, the natural state of your heart, is to be filled with love. Fear is not your nature. Worry is not your nature. Your heart is completely filled with love. And that love in your heart is so powerful that when you live in that awareness of your loving heart, then every word that comes out of your mouth and everything you do is a gift for everyone around you. So hold that place for just a few moments. Your mind is at peace and your heart is filled with love. Om Shanti.